Good evening. I call to order the meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees of the Village of Burr Ridge for Monday, March 10, 2025. Can I ask Wendy Francis to lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Wendy. Trustee Mittal gave the appropriate notice to me and Evan. She is away and she's on Zoom, so I need a motion to allow Trustee Anita Mittal to participate via Zoom.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Hello, Anita.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, so with that, Madam Clerk, roll call.
Trustee Francis?
Here.
Trustee Schiappa?
Here.
Trustee Paveza?
Here.
Trustee Snyder?
Here.
Trustee Mittal?
Here.
Trustee Smith?
Here.
Mayor Grasso?
Here.
Everyone's here.
We have no presentations or public hearings tonight, so item 4 is the consent agenda. An item shall be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any one trustee or anyone present at the meeting. Those items marked with an asterisk are considered to be on the consent agenda. A roll call shall be taken on the approval of the consent agenda and recorded in the minutes as an omnibus vote. If an item is removed from the consent agenda, it will be discussed by the board, open for public comment, and voted upon during this meeting. 5 minutes. A, approval of regular board meeting of February 24, 2025. B, receive and file plan commission meeting of January 20, 2025. And C, receive and file plan commission meeting of March 3, 2025. Under ordinances, B, approval of an ordinance amending sections 6A4 and 6A5 of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance to require a special use for overhead doors measuring 10 feet in height for attached garages in residential districts, Z02 2025, text amendment, attached garage door height. 7, resolutions, approval of a resolution supporting the Village of Burr Ridge Invest in Cook grant application for the German Church Road sidewalk connection to schools and transit. 8, considerations. C, concurrence in award of contracts and approval of spending authority of $170,000 to the Village of Hinsdale for the construction of the Elm Street Interconnect. D, approval to direct staff to prepare an ordinance approving an amended special use, Z03 2025 60 Shore Drive, Nadaf. E, approval of award of contract for purchase of a set of 4 sterile Coney mobile lifts to SLE Technologies, Inc. of Maxwell, Indiana, in the amount of $47,947.50. F, approval of award of contract for purchase of concert stage from Stage Line Mobile Stage, Inc., Quebec, Canada, in an amount not to exceed $180,000. G, approval of fiscal year 2025 third quarter budget amendments. And H, approval of vendor list dated March 10, 2025 for fiscal year 2025 in the amount of $293,581.07 for all funds, plus $244,711.77 for payroll period ending February 15, 2025 for a grand total of $538,292.84. With that, can I get a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda? 5, A, B, and C, 6, B, 7, A, 8, C through H.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion at the board level? Any discussion from the public? Roll call.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Mittal?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
6-0, the motion passes. We have some members from, some of the officials from Indian Head Park tonight, and a presentation on Wolf Road. I would like someone to move to go now to item 8B on our agenda in consideration of the public officials that are here.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. 8, consideration of alternatives for the Wolf Road corridor project.
Hello.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Matt Gadziak from Strand Associates, and I'm here to provide an update on the Wolf Road project. So I'm going to go through a couple slides on the screen from our Wolf Road public meeting that we had back in December of 2024, and then provide an update on some of the public feedback that we received at that meeting, and then ask for some input for what we are looking for as a study team. So I'll go through the slides now. Okay, so the study history. So the improvements along Wolf Road, we started looking at it back in March of 2019, where Indian Head Park began a feasibility study to evaluate adding a sidewalk and/or a shared use path along Wolf Road within their municipal limits, which were 72nd Street on the south up to Plainfield Road on the north. And the funding for this was provided from a Invest in Cook grant from the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways. And then between March and November of 2019, Strand was doing the study, and the conclusion of that was that the addition of these pedestrian improvements through a sidewalk or a shared use path would be better accomplished in conjunction with other corridor improvements, such as improving the drainage, improving the pavement, and kind of making other changes along the corridor. So with the support of Cook County, we started scoping out a much more comprehensive study, which kind of rolled into this phase 1 preliminary engineering study. And that was to evaluate roadway, drainage, bridges, and safety and other improvements along the corridor. As part of that, we also expanded the study limits beyond just Indian Head Park so that it would go from one Cook County route to another Cook County route. So that was why it ended up being from 79th Street on the south up to Plainfield Road on the north. So while Indian Head Park is still the lead agency on this project, because we expanded the project limits, it does involve a portion of Burr Ridge, which is why I'm here tonight. So from when we started in fall of 2022, or fall of 2020, up to April of 2022, that was when we had our first public involvement meeting at Indian Head Park Village Hall. And that was to present some preliminary alternatives that included roadway improvements and then also some options for bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. And that meeting was very well attended. We received over 300 public comments at the meeting, and what we heard was that the public just needed to have more input in the study process. So what we did was came up with a more comprehensive public involvement approach and kind of evolved that part of the project as it continued. So that was in fall of 2022, and from then until now is when we have kind of been in the re-emerged phase of the project. So Cook County provided additional investment to support the public involvement process, which involved establishing a formal public involvement plan, which kind of detailed how we were going to be interacting with the public and in what formats and how we were going to be kind of engaging them better. That involved launching a study website, offering additional feedback opportunities from the public, and then we also established a corridor advisory committee. So that had stakeholders. I think there's about 25 people total on the committee. People from the school districts, the park district, Burr Ridge was part of it, and it really got stakeholders, in a room in a smaller setting. So it wasn't hundreds of people at a public meeting, but there was 25 of us, in a smaller group working through things. And that's how we kind of evolved and came up with refined preliminary alternatives to get more feedback on. If you go to the next slide. So what I'm going to talk about now is kind of the alternatives that we ended up with. So with the alternatives, there is a consistent roadway configuration is proposed across the three alternatives that I'll talk about tonight. and that is there's one northbound travel lane, one southbound travel lane, and a two-way left turn lane with dedicated left turn lanes at the intersections. And that lane configuration has curb and gutter with an underground storm sewer system. So the picture on the screen in the bottom right kind of shows an example of some of the dimensions and what the roadway would look like. This is a change from the existing corridor, which only has one northbound travel lane and one southbound travel lane. There's not that two-way left turn lane in the middle, and there are open ditches. So whenever it rains, water just kind of runs off into the ditches and is not really well drained. The differences across the alternatives is in that next set of bullet points with the off-street pedestrian and or bicycle accommodations, which I'll talk about more in the next couple of slides. So that includes if you go back for 1 second, the options include a 5-foot sidewalk or an 8-foot wide shared use path. And with those, there's a minimum 5-foot buffer between either the sidewalk or shared use path and the curb and gutter. So I'm going to talk about essentially two different options tonight. Alternative 1 and Alternative 2 in the Burr Ridge section are exactly the same. So you can consider Alternative 1 and Alternative 2 pretty much the same. Alternative 3 is different. But in the Burr Ridge section, I think the map on the right side of the screen illustrates it best, where from 79th Street up to 72nd Street, there are some existing sidewalks. So what we are proposing in this alternative is to maintain that existing sidewalk where it's at, which is in the orange on the screen, and then there's some pink lines that are showing in where we're filling in the gaps. So between 79th Street and 72nd, there would be consistent sidewalk on both sides of the road. And again, that would be 5-foot wide sidewalk with a 5-foot wide buffer offset from the road. And that buffer is a minimum. So if the existing sidewalk is further away from the road, we would be maintaining that offset. But it does vary, so we're kind of cleaning things up and having it be at least 5 feet offset from the road. Alternative 2, as I mentioned, is kind of the same thing. The difference between Alternative 1 and Alternative 2 is just north of Joliet Road, where we were providing some different options within the Indian Head Park boundary. But don't have to dwell on this too much more because in the Burr Ridge section, it's exactly the same. And then if you go to Alternative 3, this is where we have a difference. So this is where we are introducing a shared use path. So again, focusing on the south part of the corridor between 79th Street and 72nd Street. Now this option has a 8-foot wide shared use path on the west side of the road. And then on the east side, we are maintaining that sidewalk, filling in the gaps where necessary. And then that shared use path would continue north into Indian Head Park up to Joliet Road, cross over to the east side of the street, and continue on the east side up to Plainfield. One slide just talking about why we made the changeover. These slides were what I presented to the Indian Head Park board at their February board meeting, but this is just detailing why we made that crossover north of Joliet, because there was information from the LaGrange Highlands school districts that supported it being on the east side, but not relevant to the Burr Ridge section. So I mentioned that a lot of these slides are from the public meeting number 2, which was held in December. This is something that came out of that meeting. So after our meeting in December, for about 5 weeks or so, we had an open public comment period where people could submit feedback via email, via comment cards we gave them, via voicemail. So out of all those methods, we received 114 comments from individuals within that open comment period, and that was through 92 emails, 17 comment cards, 5 voicemails. The vast majority of these came from individuals that were within Indian Head Park. I can only think of a handful that were explicitly identified themselves as living in Burr Ridge that were submitting these comments, so I just want to set that expectation as well. There also were 4 petitions that were submitted. The Safe Accessible Routes for All, which had 126 signatures. Within there were a few signatures that were from Burr Ridge, and then the bottom three, the Acacia Association of Townhomes, the Ashbrook Townhome Association, and the Ashbrook Estate Homes. All those petitions are Indian Head Park homeowners associations. So as you can see, a lot of feedback being provided by residents of Indian Head Park. And I think that that portion of the corridor is a little bit different because there's homes that are a little bit closer to the roadway, whereas in the Burr Ridge section, homes are set further back, so there was a little less interest. But that's who all submitted it, feedback. If you could zoom into this. So when someone submitted a comment, as I mentioned, there was 114. You know, oftentimes they were mentioning many different aspects. So maybe there was someone that was commenting positively about sidewalk, or concerns about truck traffic. So we would kind of categorize each of them into different buckets. So there was some comments talking about many different things, so they kind of were grouped in different buckets. Just touching on a couple of the highlights. The most commented one was that there was support for alternative one with the sidewalks, and then having some landscaping concerns, safety concerns, negative feedback about turn lanes. But alternative one was definitely what we heard the more support of. And again, that was, primarily, the feedback was primarily being provided by residents of Indian Head Park. So I was not able to gather any direct feedback of what did the people from Burr Ridge that commented on this have to say, because they were kind of intermixed throughout, and there wasn't that much feedback to be provided. And then the next couple slides, I think, are just put some of the texts of the petitions, which don't have to read through here. But if you could flip over to the last page of this, there's kind of a matrix. Yes. So one thing that we put together to kind of summarize all the different components of this is, what are the three alternatives and how do they compare relative to each other, with just some simple colors of green, yellow, and red, where green would be that it, is performing the best. Yellow is that it maybe had some average performance, and red, it had the relatively lowest performance. So looking at alternative one, it does accommodate the 2050 travel demand and improve operational efficiency. It does improve the traffic safety for vehicles, but it doesn't score as well looking at pedestrians and cyclists because there's not as much connectivity being provided for those elements. But it does involve a moderate amount of land acquisition, which would be temporary easement during construction, or the potential for permanent right-of-way that the county would have to acquire as part of the project. But it did have the most support from the public. Alternative two was kind of in the middle, where it still operated pretty well. It was making connections for pedestrians, and it required a moderate amount of land acquisition, and had moderate support from the public. And then the alternative three with the shared use path, because it is designed for bicyclists and pedestrians, it is providing those accommodations for them. However, because it has a little bit wider of a footprint, that doesn't, we're anticipating that's going to involve more easements, potentially more right-of-way, and had a moderate amount of support from the public. So that's kind of everything. I can be available to answer any questions. I believe this is an item for consideration tonight, so, nothing is needed, but what we are looking for as a study team with Strand and Indian Head Park as Cook County is, what does Burr Ridge want to see in your portion of the corridor? Because the construction of this would be part of the overall roadway reconstruction, but anything long-term maintenance is going to fall on the village. So if the county is building the sidewalk, they're going to want to make sure that the village is going to maintain that in the long term, because the county does not maintain any sidewalk or shared use path along their network.
So let's take questions at the board level first. Do any of the trustees have any questions of Matt? I have one. What's the expectation that Cook County will actually have the money to do this?
That's a great question. That's almost a separate track from what we are looking at right now, because until we figure out, okay, where are the lanes, is there sidewalk, is there shared use path? So we're trying to figure out what the corridor can look like, and then the county is taking the lead on finding funding sources. If there's funding sources out there for sidewalk projects, they'll go out and apply for that. If there's funding sources for bridge projects, they'll kind of piece the funding sources together. But right now, the construction of this is not funded. They've only funded this first stage to study what the corridor needs. So it's not funded long term, but what we estimated for the second public meeting is that we think it's going to be at least a $30 million project. So that's a big hit to any agency. So
For Western Cook County, outside, really, anyhow,
Yeah.
not that I'm a cynic, but I wouldn't want to spend a whole lot of time on something that, without any indication from Cook County that there's a high likelihood that it's going to get funded, because I don't see it, but
yeah.
that's just me.
Yep, and I think the county can also, do the study to figure out what is the long-term need going to be, but as funding is available, they might break it down into, 72nd Street to 79th Street. What can they do with available funding at that time and kind of piecemeal it along the way? We see that a lot with projects just because, as you mentioned, that's the realistic, result of all of this is there money to pay for it? And not at this time.
So I don't think there's any other questions. Mayor, would you like to say a few words?
I just wanted to thank Burr Ridge's involvement in our corridor advisory committee. Guy, trustee Franzi, and also ex-trustee Grella, who was a former trustee in Burr Ridge, participated in the corridor advisory council, and we appreciate your feedback. I agree that there's going to be funding challenges. We also have the Plainfield Road redesign project that also you are involved in, from County Line Road to East Avenue, which also is not funded yet. So we appreciate you looking at this information and want to be open to any feedback that you or your residents have. And we thank you for having us this evening. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and from our side of it, whomever you need information from, Dave or anyone else, we'll be a good neighbor and weigh in whenever you want the information.
Well, Dave and Evan have been part of the process. They were also at our meetings. So I forgot to mention that they've been involved. They've been involved in our email and correspondence and providing their feedback from their perspective, representing your residents and your board. So we appreciate that kind of dialogue and look forward to, hopefully, the road is in bad condition and needs to be redone, just as Plainfield does. So we're hoping that we can find the funding somewhere, either in a phased approach, whatever we can do to get the roadway looking better than it does today. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Question for Ms. Wittenberg? Question?
Oh, we have a question. Sorry.
Which alternative does the Village Board of Indian Head Park and the trustees support?
We just met at our committee of the whole meeting 2 weeks ago, and the board feels that alternative one is the best option for the village. So we are making that recommendation to the Cook County Department of Transportation in a letter that will be going out in the next week or two.
So would it help if you had a letter of support?
Absolutely.
I think that's probably where you were going.
So
Yes, that
I'd
would
like to
be
remind
great.
this board that the Village of Indian Head Park stood with the Village of Willowbrook, the Village of Burr Ridge, and other nearby communities in condemning the continued operations of Sterigenics and the support of the closure of Sterigenics in Willowbrook. Also, the Village of Indian Head Park has stood with the Village of Willow Springs, Village of Burr Ridge, Pleasantdale School District 107, and Pleasantdale Park District, supporting the current residential zoning for the LT property in Willow Springs, and is against the sale of Willow Springs LT property to an industrial developer. So I ask that this board would stand with the Village of Indian Head Park and support option number one.
We have consensus on that? I think we do. So Evan, would you coordinate a letter of support and have it submitted when Indian Head Park wants to submit its letter?
Great, thank you. Thank you for your support, trustee. Appreciate it.
Sure. Anything else? Okay. Anything more we have to do tonight?
Not on that agenda, no.
Okay.
This is good, and we'll write up a letter.
All right, so let's go back. That takes us to item 6A, consideration of an ordinance amending sections 3510, 100.2, 35-11, 208H, and 3511, 1512, and establishing section 3511, 1600, motorized play vehicles of Chapter 35 Motor Vehicles of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code, rules of the road regarding bicycles, electric scooters, and motorized play vehicles. Evan?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to invite Deputy Chief Dave Allen to come up and assist with this discussion. So, as you recall, the staff prepared an ordinance for original consideration for the board back in November. That essentially had, we're calling a more laissez-faire approach to this issue. More items were permitted in that ordinance. This ordinance is more restrictive than that ordinance. In effect, what it does is it continues to prohibit bikes being used on sidewalks and pathways. That's public sidewalks in the village. They currently must be permitted for use on streets per state law. And there are some rules that come with that. Single file can only ride so far from the side of the road. So if you see bikes on roads, that is permitted. And that also applies to electric bikes as well. However, what this ordinance does is it prohibits electric scooters on both public roads and sidewalks. So both of the main roads of public thoroughfare in the village of Burr Ridge. It does not talk about private. We do not have the authority to regulate private. So if you have a private street or a private sidewalk or just private property, that does not apply to this. It also talks about something we're calling, again, motorized play vehicles. And that is a catch-all term for anything that's not an electric bike or an electric scooter. And that might be a go-kart, a single-wheel hoverboard. You know, there's a litany of things out there. But essentially, those are going to govern the same way under an electric scooter. So again, prohibited on sidewalks and roads on public spaces in the village. This would go into effect immediately per this ordinance. You do have the opportunity to have an effective date of your choosing if it's not tonight, should this be something you want to approve. The penalties for this would still be the same as the original ordinance we drafted. This would be handled through administrative adjudication right here in this room. Fines can range from $100 to $750 per day per violation. There's also parental liability at stake here to say that if a minor commits offenses, the parent can be held responsible, and that's something that's held in state law. Deputy Chief and I can answer any further questions to help facilitate discussion tonight. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Mayor. Thank you.
So first of all, have we received comments from the public, from the residents?
I've only received 2 in the last 4 months. 4 months, is that it? One was generally saying to do this type of thing back in December. We received another one tonight generally saying keep things unrestricted, and that was passed out in front of you tonight. That'll be added to the board packet after tonight's meeting.
Yeah, and so do we think we've had enough discussion yet of this, or enough feedback from the residents to take a stance tonight, or should we get more information out, including what Deputy Chief will tell us, and see if the residents will come out and take a position one way or the other on this? I think it's a concern. I'm glad we're addressing it. I think I certainly have had the instances where I'm getting passed, sometimes in a car, by people on, scooters, on sidewalks, and not only in our village, but neighboring villages. And it just seems to be proliferating that I have to assume parents are allowing their children to have these types of vehicles, motorized vehicles that are getting pretty close to something you'd need a driver's license to operate, and at speeds that require or may require pretty quick reaction time and could end up in not only an accident but serious injury. So, I don't want government to be involved in everybody's life, but this seems, at least to me, to be a public safety issue. So I'd like to have a little discussion about it tonight and see if we want to have more input from the residents or take action tonight. So, Deputy Chief, why don't you tell us your views on this?
Sir, thank you, Mayor. On behalf of Chief Loftus, he's enjoying a vacation, well-deserved vacation today. But basically, our position is safety. That's sort of where we start and end, is with safety. So whatever guidance I can provide in terms of safety, any input, I have the number of calls we've issued, we've dealt with, I should say. Citations have not been a major factor to this point. Usually when we do encounter these situations, it's very young children, 10, 11 years old, who we're generally not going to cite. Most of the time, though, the people are gone when we get there. By the time we respond, they're in neighborhoods, they're back in their yard, they're back at home, or it's on private property. The Village Center has been one of the bigger issues for us in terms of these vehicles, but that is private property, meaning the sidewalk area, and that's not something that we can enforce. So we are trying to work with the Village Center on that, but we can only enforce the street. So again, where we're coming from is more of a safety issue. Whatever guidance you provide us, I mean, we'll do what we're told, you know. But
Right, and it is also difficult from a resident perspective. For example, thank you for pointing that out. A resident probably wouldn't understand that we can't enforce it in the Village Center, yet it's in the Village Center where somebody could be zooming down one of the sidewalks or streets and really cause significant problems. So that's yet another public education issue. But you did say that, Deputy Chief, and just give us a little bit more information on what kind of calls are you getting, who are you getting them from?
Sure.
And you did indicate that by the time, quote, you get there, the people on the scooters are gone. So give us the nature of what the calls have been like and whether
Yes,
or not
sir.
they're increasing.
So what we deal with, oftentimes, we deal with many different types of vehicles. We're dealing with e-bikes and e-scooters right now, but as the village administrator pointed out, there are several different, there are four-wheelers, mopeds, mini bikes, almost miniature motorcycles, almost. Every kind of vehicle that's out there we encounter, and again, most of the time, it's very young people. They're cutting through neighborhoods, through yards, through different pathways. We get calls generally from residents who are concerned or honestly somewhat irritated by the constant traffic from these vehicles. But it's normally e-scooters, e-bikes, mini bikes, four-wheelers, every different kind, play vehicles, as the village administrator brought up, motorized play vehicles, anything that falls under there. There's people that ride the skateboards almost with the one big wheel in the center. Anything motorized that's out there, we see. And that's generally what we get calls for. We just get calls from people who are concerned, who don't understand where they're allowed, where they're not allowed. And that brings up the education that they were discussing. We have flyers on the website. We have flyers that we're preparing to distribute to everyone, just to at least begin to educate people on what's allowed, what's not allowed. Are e-bikes allowed on the street? On the sidewalks, on the streets, both, neither. A lot of things, there are a lot of misconceptions with these vehicles. So that's something that we're trying to help educate people with. To answer your question, numbers-wise, Mayor, last year we got 31 complaints. The year before was 24. That 31 and 24 includes all the different vehicles that you can think of. It includes people seeing bicycles, but the kid's not wearing a helmet. It includes everything. So it's really a myriad of issues.
And then the other question to be considered is, even if we act and prohibit something, how enforceable is it going to realistically be? You hear the deputy chief. So again, a balance between government taking a position and some things maybe we shouldn't regulate. And we haven't heard a lot from the residents on this. Obviously, we have parents that are buying these things for the kids that are in the village. So I want to kind of understand their mindset as to why they're buying them and what rules they're setting. So anyhow, I'll throw it out to any of you to ask questions or make comments. Yes?
Deputy, so for example, we had 30 calls. By the time you get there, it's most of the time they're not there.
Yes, I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but a fair number of times they're gone, especially with the Village Center calls. They could now be in a store, they could be in the parking garage, they could be in Starbucks. And by the time we get there, a lot of times they're not there. Or there are juveniles in the area, but there wasn't a good description, so we don't know if these are the kids, if these are not the kids. So obviously we want to err on the side of caution with stopping the wrong people, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Tony?
So you mentioned that these are vehicles, and if they're on the road, they,
I have a question.
Oh, okay, Anita, 1 second.
Yeah.
Tony, wait,
So,
go ahead.
sorry. Okay, I can't see. So, but if we were to get these kids who are violating the law, then how would we find them? I mean, that's my question. What would be a penalty for them?
So, thank you for that question. As the village administrator pointed out, if we do cite them, it would go towards the parents, depending on the age. Anywhere from $100 to $750 would be the fine. Our position and the chief's position is to generally begin with education, warnings, things of that nature, calling the parents, trying to not go the citation route if necessary. If it's a repeat offender, if there's other behavior that's more severe that comes along with riding an e-bike or an e-scooter, and that's just a part of it, we can obviously take more enforcement action. But at this point, it would just be a citation at worst. If it was very extreme, we could impound the vehicle as well. But I think that would be not something we would do most of the time.
Okay, Tony?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
so that you call them vehicles, and if they're on the road, they have to follow the rules of the road.
Correct, yes. The only thing that's allowed currently on the road, and please, village administrator, correct me if I'm wrong, would be an e-bike. E-scooters, all the motorized play vehicles, those things are not currently allowed on public roadways at all, under any circumstance. Just the e-bikes.
Yes, Guy?
You mentioned you're working with the Village Center and their problem with these vehicles on their sidewalks. How can we help you and the police department working with the Village Center?
That's a good question. Appreciate it, first of all. I would have to talk to the chief and get back to you, because as of right now, what we're trying to do is, obviously, we're an enforcement entity, and we can't enforce laws on private property, but obviously we can come and try to help educate, try to talk to the kids, try to talk to the parents, and just sort of hopefully that gets the message across without us being able to take enforcement action. But I will definitely get with the chief to see if there is anything else.
I'm wondering, is this a problem, say, like at Oak Brook Mall? Or at downtown LaGrange, on their sidewalks?
I know that we've talked with Clarendon Hills, we've talked with Hinsdale. I know the mayor had an experience in Hinsdale before with this. I could not speak to Oak Brook or LaGrange, but I would assume, hopefully not incorrectly, that if some of our business areas are having these problems, that they all are. Okay. I have personally seen a couple at Oak Brook recently. I can't speak to the volume that they deal with, but I would imagine anywhere there are sidewalks and stores, you're going to have kids on scooters.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Russ?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Chief. My big concern is the, number one, the safety for the young adults, because they're not going to win if they run into a car or another vehicle. And then I mentioned this before, I do worry about the liability for our residents. You know, you're driving a car, you're minding your own business, and the way that some of these youngsters operate these e-bikes, toys, whatever they are, you know, if you run into one of these youngsters with your car, you're going to have a huge legal issue on your hands. And I just like the fact that we as a board are kind of getting ahead of this and at least hopefully trying to limit the impact out there as far as the liabilities and potential harm to the youngsters. So thank you.
Tony, one more?
Yeah. Evan, are there other villages in our area that have passed ordinances for this?
Yeah, so Clarendon Hills has done pretty much exactly what's in front of you, which is a total ban. Hinsdale, I think, is pretty much a total ban. So I would say predominantly communities that have taken action on this are leaning towards something that is in front of you tonight.
Okay, thank you.
And then it would be easier to go total ban, at least there's no wiggle room that way as to what it really means. And then I do like the approach that the chief and the deputy chief would be taking with the residents, especially giving warnings, working with the parents, hopefully educating them at least for a period of time, a grace period of time, because we're not looking to fine people $100 or anything like that. We're, as Russ pointed out, we're trying to be safe and safer here.
Can I ask our wonderful attorney a question?
Yes.
If we went to the village center and asked that our officers could go on private property, does that get us in any kind of, do we have wiggle room if the village center approves it?
You do have the ability to enter into an agreement with a private property owner to do traffic enforcement on their shopping center areas.
That's another,
It solves that problem.
yeah, but I don't know how selective we can be about that. But it is something we should look into to see. I'd like to get the chiefs and the deputy chiefs' input before we do that to see how much more police power it might be needed, but certainly something we should look into. Yes? Guy?
So last time we discussed this issue, I asked if we could age restrict the e-bikes, and I was told you'd get back to me on that. Is there any further information on being able to age restrict e-bikes?
I'm pretty sure we can't.
Yeah,
based
it's
on what I
pretty
can tell.
much what was stated the last time, I think, when Chief Loftus was speaking on it. There's certain categories that
Right.
require licenses, but beyond that, we can't
And then
do
clarify.
anything other than with respect to these other types, these hoverboards or whatever, we can regulate those because those are not governed by the vehicle code.
All right. And also, you mentioned educate. So I'm assuming you mean educate the parents, the riders, and the residents, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Thank you.
And there is, just to add, there is one age restriction with the Class 3 electric bike, which is the fastest with the biggest motor, and that's 16 years old. So to ride that Class 3, you have to be 16 years old throughout the state of Illinois.
And does that bike say Class 3 on it?
It might, and maybe nowhere we would be able to see, maybe in tiny letters, but.
Exactly my
yeah.
point. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, with that, I suppose I'll entertain a motion to approve the ordinance, or direct staff to draft the ordinance, yes?
Is there any public comment?
Thank you, appreciate that. Is there any public comment?
George Dacre, 11774 Briarwood Court. My backyard backs up to 79th Street. I've been here for 20 years. I agree with you, Russ, and with you, Mayor, and with the chief. I think these bikes are ridiculous. They're totally unsafe. If there were some older people perhaps riding them around leisurely, I would accept them. But we seem to have a problem in the village. The kids I see going up and down 79th Street are junior high boys. They're very disrespectful. I've asked them to, and they don't listen to me. I've called the police several times, always professionally responding, but of course their kids are gone or whatever. And I hate to say this, but with all the traffic, how it grows here every year, we need to, there's an accident looming, and we just need to stop this. These aren't licensed. There's no lights on them. I might drive home right now and see a couple of them. There needs to be an ordinance like in Hinsdale and just abolish it. And I hate to be a party pooper, but I think it's for our safety. Thank you.
Right, and to Russ's point also, it's people who are driving a car. I mean, I was driving over the bridge, I-55 bridge, and three of them were going with traffic, up County Line Road. If an accident happens, as Russ also points out.
Gary, many times they go right down the middle of 79th Street on Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
They have no respect for the law.
They're being kids. We were all there. We're indestructible until we're not. And so I'm glad the board is taking this up tonight. And it would seem to me that there's really no middle ground. It is either all or nothing, and I think it's more prudent to be as restrictive as possible and then work with the chief and the deputy chief to educate the residents. especially the parents that have given these vehicles to their children, to understand how serious this could end up, limiting, in the worst situations, limiting their lifestyle if they get hurt badly enough. I'd be in favor of it passing tonight and being as restrictive as possible. We have another, Mary, come on up.
Mary Bradley,
Really?
121 Surrey Lane. I have a question.
Use the microphone because it also is
Okay,
recorded.
I'm sorry. I'm my age. I'm thinking of County Line Road, Plainfield. There's some pathways there behind, from Carriageway over to Plainfield. There's a pathway. I mean, my husband, we're not riding bikes anymore, but up until about a year ago, we were, and we would use those pathways for our regular bicycles. And the way I'm reading this, we can't use those anymore, and those are busy streets. I don't want to be on the street.
I don't think we're telling people on bicycles they can't use those paths.
Well, I
Yeah,
don't
we
know,
are.
that's what
Yes,
I,
we are.
all bikes must be used
Pedal and
on
electric
public
are
roads.
prohibited.
And that's the
I
way.
use them too, by the way.
And that's the way the rule currently is. That's not a change, to clarify. The rule in the village today, prior to any approval that may occur, is that bikes are not permitted on public pathways or sidewalks anywhere in the village.
That's surprising, I did not know
Well, when you
that.
see me on my bike, don't report me.
And then the only other thing is this, like in Carriageway, we don't have sidewalks at all. And I do see 8 and 9-year-olds on these little scooters. They're not as fast as what I hear you talking about, but does that mean they can't ride those on the street at all?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it means. They can't ride those on the street at all. Now, I suppose if they stayed in the neighborhoods where it's safer,
Yeah.
officer might stop someone and educate them and
I was
give
gonna
somebody
say
a
because-
warning. But I think what we're really concerned about, Mary, and I think we all are, is they're regularly now being used on County Line Road, 79th Street, Wolf Road, Madison. I mean, the streets where they shouldn't be used. And I'll bet the average parent wouldn't want their child on any of those streets. Now, if it's a side street where, or within Carriageway or something, they would certainly understand that. But what we're trying to do is eliminate the danger of them being in an area where vehicles are traveling at significant speeds.
And I agree. I've been sometimes appalled to see how fast some of them go, even the smaller ones. But I just wasn't sure how to communicate that. And when I mentioned this to one of my parents, I don't know, 9 months ago when I first had a conversation with one of you, she just said, well, no, the police think it's fun, It's so I think you've got an enforcement issue too.
Yeah, there'll be an enforcement issue, no doubt about it. We certainly also want our police doing police work and not trying to chase children and speaking to parents and taking the time to go through all of that.
Okay.
But maybe something should be done, and we concentrate at least on patrolling and enforcing on the major highways that are within Burr Ridge, which are somewhat easily defined, somewhat. As I just mentioned, County Line Road, Madison, Wolf, 79th Street, Plainfield. Maybe not so much in Carriageway or some other neighborhoods, but certainly on the main highways is where we're getting the concern and where we're seeing these vehicles traveling. So I don't think we can pass an ordinance that is effective only on certain certain roads within the village.
Well, okay. I just wanted to clarify, so I understood better.
Anyone else? Yes, Al?
We hear, we hear the problems that they create for other traffic. Are there any records of the injuries of these kids falling off and how they're getting hurt in that?
No, sir, we don't have any of that data.
Pardon?
No, we don't have any of that data. I don't remember us responding to any injuries, but I couldn't say for sure.
You know, just throwing it, the alternative to the ordinance would be a public awareness campaign. You know, to the extent that we want to have staff and the police and others trying to make the parents understand that the children cannot be on the major highways or really anywhere in the village, and see how that's responded to. We could maybe try that first and then an ordinance, because I do think the ordinance is gonna be hard to enforce. Any thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, enforcement's always an issue with, when younger residents are the violators, so.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, if I'm sorry.
Wait, someone want to comment? So you have to come up, please.
This is Ursula Galika. Good evening. I think it's a bigger problem than most people
Sorry, what was
think.
your name?
Ursula Galika. I mean, we live on a circle drive. We walk daily for about an hour, and the area leading towards the village center is always full of these type of vehicles. And it's not just kids. It's not just teenagers. It's adults in golf carts. It's adults in kids' cars with the kids on roads. I mean, we really walk a lot, and we have kids and teenagers flying by on e-bikes, on all kinds of electric vehicles that are for kids, right? So they usually go really fast. If you wanted to catch them, you wouldn't be able to. If you say something to them, they don't pay attention. We see all kinds of different kids. It's not always the same kids. And something definitely needs to be done, because especially in the evening can be really scary when you're walking and somebody flies by you. So definitely a good point brought up today. Thank you.
State your name, please.
Yeah, Wendy Franzese, for anybody who doesn't know that already. I just wanted to also mention, because it came up about that it might be a little safer for these kids in, neighborhoods as opposed to the main highways, the main roads. And I just want to say that in our particular neighborhood, this is a huge concern, because we have limited access. So there's just one entrance into our subdivision, and then the road kind of goes in a circle with all these cul-de-sacs off the main circle. And these kids on the e-bikes and go-karts and all, I just go flying around the neighborhood. And it is really, I'm frightened for the kids, but I'm frightened for the residents and the adults too, because we had a friend visiting us, and he went to back his truck out of our driveway to leave. He looked carefully, started to back up, and then one of these kids on a go-kart came flying around the corner, and he could have hit him. So it really is a concern, even in our neighborhoods where there is limited access and it's not a main highway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Russ.
Mayor, or this could be an attorney question. Are we able to exclude pedal bikes from being prohibited on public pathways?
That's
I'm bringing
state
this
law.
up because I'm one of those
Yeah,
individuals
I think
that.
You can exempt those from, you can permit those on public pathways if you want.
I'm one of those individuals, I'd rather be on a pathway than on the street. And I think about our young families out there. You're trying to teach, the youngster how to ride a bike. You don't want them out on the streets. You want them on the pathways. I think we should allow at least pedal bikes on the pathways. Just a thought.
Well,
I'm on
those
those
pedal
paths.
bikes go up to 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, mine does.
Okay, so it's a vehicle, I think it belongs on the road, not where people are walking with a stroller or just taking a walk.
Well, maybe we'll look at that and see if there's a way to tweak that only to not e-bikes, just bikes, maybe. But let's stay with the ordinance. Not that that's not a good idea, but let's stay with the ordinance at hand. Yes, Guy?
A couple questions on the ordinance as it's written currently. Could you please turn to PDF page 74? Yes. Section 2. So in there, it talks about registration and licensing. and a registration fee. Are we proposing that in this ordinance?
So the original language is regulate the operation of bicycles and require registration. So this is sort of a remnant of state law that says that, yes, you can have bicycle registration. The village has never done that. You theoretically could, but we just haven't explored that.
We're not proposing that at this point.
No.
No, okay, thank you. And on PDF page 76, please. Section, scroll up, please. Find it here. I'm sorry, section A, down below. In accordance with state law, low-speed electric bicycles are permitted to be operated on public streets and roads within the village of Burr Ridge. But it doesn't say where they're prohibited.
So, okay, I'm sorry. So state law, when it says state law, that means that they may be ridden on public streets and roads in accordance with state rules.
Okay.
State rules say that they may be ridden any place the village or the municipality permits them to be ridden. And so right now, because you've banned them on public sidewalks, but state law permits them by right to be on streets, the only place that they end up being legal is on streets, subject to several other regulations such as single file, so close to the curb, et
This
cetera.
is not going to confuse a parent?
No, it simply says that we are picking up state law regarding electric bicycles.
Okay. And somewhere else in here it says it's prohibited to be ridden on public pathways and so forth.
There's electric scooters that may not be, that it shall be.
I'm specifically talking about low-speed electric bikes.
Okay, let me.
Oh, you don't have to find it right now. Please make sure that in the ordinance it says that they're prohibited on pathways and sidewalks.
Okay.
I see the term pathways being used exclusively, and we also need to, we have pathways and we have sidewalks. Sidewalks are in subdivisions, pathways interconnect the various subdivisions in the village. So it needs to be clear, crystal clear.
Well, what's the consensus? Is everyone, number one, want to pass an ordinance that restricts these motorized vehicles? Two, do we want to tweak any of this language now or pass it the way it's been presented? Although, Evan, if we passed it tonight, it would require registration of bikes and...
No, it would not.
Okay.
You'd have to set up a separate registration program.
That would be in a separate ordinance then. Thank you.
We passed it tonight, we're preparing an ordinance. We'll see it next.
Right.
No,
So-
you can approve an ordinance tonight. You may approve this ordinance tonight as it's written, should that be your direction.
Okay.
Well, let me start with that. Do I have a motion to prepare the ordinance, to pass the ordinance as written?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Mayor,
Yes.
I would ask that the wording pathways and sidewalks be included together in the ordinance. And also that we address Trustee Smith's concerns about bicycles on pathways at a future date. We address that separately.
So you're amending, your motion is as amended, right? And Tony's your second as amended?
Tony made the motion, I seconded it.
Okay, I'm
so
sorry.
I'm asking Tony to.
Motion, are you okay with as amended?
So can I suggest that the amendment be incorporated into that paragraph A, low-speed electric bicycles? In accordance with state law, low-speed electric bicycles are permitted to be operated on public streets and roads within the village in accordance with state law, and add a sentence that they are prohibited on public pathways and sidewalks in that same paragraph. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes,
Trustee
thank you.
Francis?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the motion. Any other discussion? Any public comment? All right, roll call.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes. 6-0, that motion passes. Okay. Takes us to the last substantive item on the agenda tonight, 8A, consideration of final draft fiscal year 2026 budget. Evan?
Thank you, Mayor. As I said, on February 24th, this is the last stop before April 14th. We'll have a public hearing at that board meeting. At that point, the board will be asked to approve the fiscal year 26 ordinance. That will be a budget ordinance. We have a very small number of just revisions, just to note on. There's nothing crazy, critical. Just wanted to point out one thing that Trustee Smith and I pointed out. So page 38 of the budget, this number on wages, 3810894, this accidentally included the overtime budget as well. This should read something like 3,580,000. So just wanted to note a typo that was identified there. So this number is actually a little bit lower. It doesn't make any impact on the general fund. It's just a presentation issue. There were a couple of small budgetary changes that I can get into, like basically the net effect is that the expenditures, the entire budget went up a net of $7,000, and that's simply due to better pricing being available. Some pricing went down, some pricing went up, but again, the all-fund impact of our changes was $7,000. So no material impact on the budget. All the funds essentially come out as is. The general fund's actually a little bit more to the good. But again, if there are any further comments, directions, changes, et cetera, tonight, we'll take them, but staff has no further presentation to make. Thank you.
Does anybody want to make any changes to the budget? I think everybody's good with it, Evan, especially the way it was presented. Anne Marie's not here, but the staff did just a great job, which makes it easier and results in no further revisions. So this will now be on the agenda. I'm a little ahead of myself, but there will not be a March 24th meeting. There will be an April 14th meeting, at which time the budget will be presented. And of course, you know, if you find something that's material and you do want to tweak it, you know, certainly bring it forward to Evan. But right now, we're going to pass the budget the way it is. Okay. With that, let's go to public comment. Is there any public comment? Mary, should get a seatbelt for that chair.
Mary Bradley, 121 Surrey Lane. You were presented tonight the January 20th minutes from the Planning Commission. That's what I'm here about. And it was verbatim for all the people that were there. The place was crowded, and there were a lot of people, and the consensus was they were against the proposal. What I really want you to know is in the minutes, you don't get the comments that were put in the Planning Commission's packet. And I don't know if all of you read those, but there were I want you to know, pages 147 to 197 in the Planning Commission packet for that meeting. It starts with the letter from the ad hoc CNH committee president, and he basically expressed the committee's consensus that the bridge proposal was unacceptable. In addition, there were 20-some residents from Fieldstone, Carriageway, Chestnut Hills, Savoy Club, Burr Ridge in general, and even 5 from Willowbrook that expressed concern over this project. In the pages there, I had submitted a petition that I've been passing around my neighborhood. As president of my homeowners association, we've been following this pretty closely. We represent 82 single-family homes and 37 townhomes. We've developed some relationships with the condominiums, and there's 132 townhomes, or condos. So altogether, there's 251 residences in our area. This is the pitch. Can I pass something around to you?
Well, just let me, yes, but just let me.
Okay.
Appreciate your public comment, absolutely, it's great.
Right.
But you're speaking on a subject to the board that is not in front of the board and hasn't gotten to the board and somewhat is circuitous of the Plan Commission process. So
Okay.
glad to have your comments, not trying to stop them at all, but they can only be taken in context, and right now, there is nothing in front of the board on the CNH proposal.
No.
It's
just that was the
and we don't know if
public
there
hearing.
will ever be at this point, so,
Okay.
but, you know, so your comments are, again, a little bit ahead of the process, but appreciated, so yes, pass out whatever you'd like.
Okay, it is our thing. We were hoping, I know that at one of the planning commission meetings, the chairman of the planning commission commented that they were in a reactive position rather than a proactive position. And-
Which is the correct way to be.
And,
at the
and
Plan
at
Commission.
some point, we were hoping that at some point, the board can just say, cut it off and we're done with it.
Well, that would not be the way a democracy works.
Okay.
Some other countries might do that, but not this country.
Well, anyway, we have a petition. It's online. I can wait and pass this out later, but I just wanted you to know there are more comments that are not in your minutes tonight that are in their packet, and it definitely is. It was amazing how widespread it was around Burr Ridge.
Okay,
So,
so I do appreciate that, and I think the board will take notice of that.
Yeah.
And then just a comment, I usually don't comment a public comment, but something will probably be on those 110 acres someday. You understand
we
that?
recognize that.
Okay, okay.
We recognize that. It's just that what they're proposing is not light industrial.
And I certainly respect that position also. Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, with that, Anita, you're still with us? Any reports or communications?
The only thing I want to tell everyone is stay tuned for Armed Forces Day on May 17th, Saturday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. In front of the Village Hall.
Thank you. Any other trustees, any reports or communications? All right, I just have one. You know, I got maybe a little ahead of myself, too. I did say that there'd probably be some discussion tonight about the potential of a new village hall. We're going to still investigate some things. The idea of putting it on a site at the village center has a little bit of a hiccup in it. The lender has weighed in, and so right now we have to get some more definition to that. And we also have reduced pricing. I've been getting several emails from residents opposing a $10.5 million building. That might be a little ahead of themselves too. We're not anywhere near that. The revised pricing is somewhere in the mid $8 million range, and that's, again, just a number that's not been obviously even put in front of this board. So we are looking at it. All I can assure the residents is that this village has always been fiscally sound. And we are not going to build a new village hall unless this board is satisfied that it is being done in a fiscally sound manner. So please stay tuned, please weigh in, but just give us a little time to formulate plans, and there will be full public hearings before any commitment to a new village hall is made. And with that, can I get a motion to adjourn to the next meeting, which will be April 14th? Have a motion, second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.
Aye.